absolutely. No, I love that. I love it when people stretch, right? Because that's where we grow, when we stretch. And so it was really cool to hear that. I'm so glad that Alex wanted to do this. He's doing it as a way to practice for baccalaureate, because he's been asked to speak there. And he said his kids get extra credit for coming today. Hey, I'm trying, right? Okay, maybe not, but that's all right. But I got to hear him at the 8:15 service this morning. And I thought, oh man, you're going to listen to him and you boot me out of here. You're going to want this guy. He's good. He's really, really good. His message is great. He spent a lot of time, I can tell, putting it together. He kind of just keeps his notes to the side. It's really great. Of course, I'm looking up right now. But please help me welcome Alex Coleman this morning to preach.
Chuck, can you hear me? That's a good start.
That's the power. You probably put the mic on.
You're great.
Me or her?
Such a powerful message.
Well, I just want to thank Brian for the opportunity to get to talk this morning. My name is Alex Coleman. I'm a teacher here on Kwajalein, if you don't know me. And probably for the better part of 4 or 5 years, I've been doing YF with Cher West Kirk. And so I'm just really thankful those 4 years ago that Cher told me that I was going to do YF and I didn't have an option. Because that's been one of the best blessings in my life and the highlight of my time on Kwaj is getting to spend time with teens and kids and get to tell them what Jesus is doing in my life and what he's doing in their lives. And so one of the things that we kind of ran across a few months ago was the parable of the Prodigal Son. And before, whenever I had read this parable, I kind of just thought, oh, that's really cool. This guy messes up a lot. He goes home, the father gives him a big hug, and is like, awesome, I'm glad you're back. And that was kind of the extent that I had with that scripture. And for some reason, the last few months, as I really thought about that scripture, it really spoke to me. And I really thought about the different characters and how sometimes I feel like I can relate to the prodigal son, I can relate to the older brother. And so I just want to kind of talk about some perspectives. This is my first time preaching, so I don't know how it's supposed to go. So I'm going to do what I did YF.
Second time preaching.
Second time preaching, because I did 8:15 this morning. So in YF, I read scripture, we talk about it, read scripture, talk about it. So that's what I'm going to do this morning. I don't know if that's the right way, but that's the way it's going to get done today. So if you have a Bible, go ahead and turn to Luke 15, please. Luke 15. And before I get into the parable of the prodigal son, I want to set the background of this. And I want us to talk about who Jesus was talking to and what were the circumstances that he was talking. So we're going to start in verse 1 and 2. Okay? Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathered around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Now whenever I read the scripture and I think about tax collectors and sinners, I think tax collectors are just people that, hey, you're supposed to pay $2 and they take $3, and so they put an extra $1 in their pocket. Seems a little unfair, right? But the tax collectors in those days, that might have not been the most accurate representation. Tax collectors in those days were funding the Roman army. Now the Roman army was coming through people's towns and cities and fighting them. They were killing the men. They were taking the women and children. So how do you feel if you're in that community towards tax collectors? You do not like them. You probably want to hurt them, right? And so Jesus is sitting there with tax collectors. And then he's also sitting there with sinners. And I think, I'm a sinner. I mess up, so maybe he's just sitting around talking to people like you and me, right? Sometimes I say some things I shouldn't say or speak correctly. Sometimes I do some things that I shouldn't do, right? But the sinners that he's talking to, you can think about the woman in the well. The woman at the well had multiple husbands. She had multiple boyfriends. Okay, so he's sitting there talking with prostitutes. He's talking to crippled people. Back then, if you were crippled, people thought it was your parents' fault. Or that you created this humongous sin, right? So if you're a crippled person, it's like, hey, it's your fault you're that way. Or it's your parents' fault that you're that way. So imagine that group that Jesus is sitting around. He's sitting around with tax collectors, people that no one likes. He's sitting around with prostitutes. He's sitting around with people that are lame, that can't walk. That's quite a group. You guys do not look like this group. You guys are all wearing your Sunday best. You guys all look very nice. Okay? And then on the outskirts of this group, you can picture the Pharisees that are sitting there. And they're in total judgment of Jesus. Because if you were a Pharisee, you were the best of the best. Okay? How many people think that they know a lot of scripture, that they have it memorized? Okay? I think maybe on a good day I can do 10 verses. I'll be lucky if I get to 10 verses. The Pharisees had the first 5 books of the Bible memorized. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Okay? I don't know if you guys have ever done that year reading plan, but whenever I get to Numbers, I'm like, I give up. There's too many numbers here. They're sacrificing too many animals. Let's just move to the New Testament. It's a lot easier that way. Okay? And they had the first 5 books of the memorized, and their philosophy was, I'm going to earn my way. I'm going to just do as many good things as I can. I'm going to follow the law as close as I can, and that's going to make me better than everybody else. And so there's 2 very contrasting styles, right? You have this group that's thought of as the outcasts of society, and you have the group here that's all the pastors and the mega preachers, right? That think they're too good. And so Jesus is going to give them a couple parables. I'm only going to get into the 3rd one, but he's going to have a message for both groups, and so we'll get into that. So we're going to jump ahead to verse 11. Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the son got together all that he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in living. Okay? So back then, apparently, you could ask for your inheritance ahead of time. And because he was the younger brother, he's going to get a 1/3 of the property. So he goes to dad, he says, hey, add up everything you have, I would like a 1/3 of that. So as I'm reading the scripture, I'm like, this is a good idea. So I called my dad up last weekend. And I said, because I'm the older brother, so I'm going to get 2/3, right? And so I called my dad and I said, hey, is there any way that you can add up everything you have and I get 2/3 of that right now? And he says, I hope to stick you with the biggest bill ever when I pass away. And so that kind of backfired on me. So he was not for that. But another interesting perspective about this scripture is, think about the dad's reaction to this. We don't hear what the dad says to him, but what does the dad do? He gives it to him. He lets him go. Okay? I'm not a parent, but I see a lot of parents here. If your kid watched a commercial about what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, and they decided to ask for a bunch of money from you, what would your reaction be? No, not going to happen. I know what's going to happen. Okay? Do you think the father knew what was going to happen to his son? Think he knew what he was going to do? You bet. And he lets him go and do it anyway. And so I think about all the gifts that God gives me and gives us. And he lets us choose what we do with it. We have an opportunity, whether we use it for good or bad. God's going to give us the opportunity to choose what we do with those gifts. I think that's so awesome. Let's continue. Verse 14. And he had spent everything, and there was a severe famine in that whole country. And he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. Okay? So he spends all of the money that he has. He creates these shallow relationships, and as soon as he runs out of money, people bail. People are leaving him, and so he's left by himself with no money. And so he's got to eat. So he hires himself out to this person, and he goes out and feeds pigs. Okay? Now, if you know anything about Jewish custom, you know pigs are dirty and disgusting and gross. We don't like pigs, which is unfortunate for them because that's bacon. Okay? And so they did not like bacon. When I am deserted on a tropical island, 3 things that I can breathe, bacon is one of them. Okay? So I feel like these people are missing out. Let's continue reading. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. Okay? So he realized, like, what am I doing? These pigs are eating better than I am. I should just go back to my dad, even though I've messed up big time, and I'm just going to say, hey, just hire me as a worker. And that's going to be better than what I'm doing right now. Okay? How many times have you guys ever messed up, especially in high school, and you know that mom and dad are waiting for you? And you got to come up with your story. How do I make this sound not as bad as it is? This whole group here shaking their heads because you shouldn't do that. Okay? And so, I think about when I was 15, I rode my bike to practice, to baseball practice. It was only a couple blocks away. That's how lazy I was. It was only a couple blocks away, so I'm like, yes, I need to ride a bike. But you guys all ride bikes, and you don't know the difference. You know, it's like everyone rides a bike. So I rode a bike to practice, and then after practice, I had all my baseball gear, and I just walked home. I left the bike there. So I get home, set my stuff down, I'm like setting up the table, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I left the bike at the field. And I just take off in this dead sprint down the neighborhood. Okay? Then I get to the field, there's no bike. I feel like my parents were quite lucky. I think I was a pretty easy teenager, but one of the unfortunate things is I lost everything. Like, I would forget sweatshirts all the time at school. I'd lose everything. Everything that I brought with me, I'd always forget it somewhere. And so I walked back to my parents' house with my tail between my legs thinking, how do I make this sound like I'm not a complete knucklehead? That I forgot to bring my bike back home. Do you guys ever know, like, when you mess up, you know which parent to go to? You're like, okay, I'm gonna go to dad on this one, I'm going to mom on this one. Okay, so I was like, my mom's super just graceful and merciful. I'm like, I'm gonna go to mom on this one. And usually she's like, I'll talk to your dad for you. Yes. Okay? So I went and found mom. I said, hey, I left my bike at the field. And she's like, too bad, so sad. Go tell your dad. So I go outside, and he's watering the yard. And I, in my mind, I'm like, okay, here's my story. Here's what I'm going to come up with. Dad, I only left it there for a few minutes. It's not my fault. And he sits there straight faced and listens to me. And then he just points the hose at me and sprays me and drops and walks away. And that was it. That was the only thing I got. And I was kind of like, phew, that could have gone a lot worse. Okay? So the son is coming up with this story of like, hey, what am I going to tell my dad so he's going to let me back? Because I've messed up big time. He knows he's messed up big time. So let's see what the father's reaction is going to be. Let's see if he sprays him with the hose. Okay? Well, before I do that, let's talk about the audience that he was talking to. So if you're in the audience right now and you're a sinner, what are you thinking? You're thinking, man, I've heard this story. This son messes up, he does bad things. I have an idea of what's going to happen. He's going to get punished big time. And so you're like, this seems no different than what the Pharisees are telling. And if you're a Pharisee at this moment, you're like, yes, get him, Jesus. Okay? Maybe Jesus isn't such a bad guy. He's going to tell a story about this father that's going to make him do all these things. He's going to give him a long list of things to do to make up for all the mistakes that he had. Okay? That's what I picture in my mind as I'm reading these scriptures. Okay, but let's see how the dad reacts here. I think we're second half of verse 20. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. And he ran to his son and threw his arms around him and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servant, quick, bring the robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fat calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And so they began to celebrate. This is my favorite part of the whole parable. Am I echoing right now? No? Okay, good. This is my favorite part of the parable. Because the son is practicing this speech as he's going to come up to the father. Okay? Losing my bike probably doesn't pale in comparison to what he did. He probably did a lot worse things than losing his bike. He's coming up with this speech. And what I picture is the father's already standing outside the house looking for him. He knows he's going to come back. He expects him to come back. Okay? And so he sees his son, and he takes off running. Okay? I've never seen my dad run before. But if he was running at me after I just messed up, I'm going to be a little scared. And so he's coming up with this story, and the dad comes up and he's like, hey, by the way, Dad, and Dad just gives him a giant hug. He gives him a big kiss. He puts a ring on his finger, he puts sandals on his feet, he puts a robe on him. Do you imagine what this guy looked like after feeding pigs for all these days? Ooh, he was probably in rough shape, right? But the dad doesn't care about that. He just embraces him and loves him, and he's so happy that he returns. And we're going to come back to this part in his reaction to the son. I'm going to take a bit of a tangent here, okay? Because this is a pet peeve of mine. And I talked about this a few times in YF. Because at the very end, the dad's like, hey, let's kill the fatted calf, let's have a big party, let's dance and celebrate. Christians are not good at partying. They're terrible partiers. I grew up in Texas, so I know, all right? I was in the Bible Belt, okay? And one of the things that I've talked about YF multiple times is when people have birthdays, we want to go all out, okay? I have some friends that are fantastic party planners. Mrs. Gerber is a great party planner. Some of my best birthdays are ones that she's planned. She does a great job decorating, we do party gifts, there's nice fancy cupcakes, it's all really nice. And I feel really important that I was able to eat and breathe and wake up for a whole year. Kudos to me, okay? But how many times do we celebrate when someone decides to follow Jesus? I don't know what your guys' experience was, but when I decided to get baptized, I was like 13 or 14, and I got out of the water, and I got out of the hot tub, and my dad's like, cool, congratulations. And I think my parents were all like, look, the wind is blowing. Am I good? Nope, I'm not good. I didn't have to deal with this in the 8:15 service. I just yelled into the big room. I think my parents were relieved. They're like, yes, he's a Christian now. He's going to make good decisions. And we don't have to worry about him getting in so much trouble. Woohoo! Okay? But no one ever had a big party, right? When people decide to follow Jesus and have a relationship with Jesus, is that not the most eternal thing ever? I mean, that's permanent. You turning is what happened every 365 days. I'm moving too much. I just need to stand still. I got it. We're good. I'm just going to hold it here. Are you still there? Okay. Can I do this? Okay, let's just do this. Sorry. But we celebrate these birthdays, which are good things. We celebrate having a party for scholarships. Those are good things, but those are also very temporary things. Why do we not celebrate someone who wants to have a relationship with Jesus? Because those are eternal things. So I really want to encourage you. If someone decides to become a Christian, let's not just pat them on the back and be like, hey, cool, you're in the club. All right? Let's really celebrate it the way that the Father did for the Son coming back. All right, let's get to the older brother here. Verse 25. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. And when he came near to the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother becomes angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered his property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fatted calf for him. Try again. Okay, so the brother's out working. He's doing what he's supposed to be doing. Sometimes I feel that way myself, and I would say a lot of people here feel the same way. Is that I see a lot of the same people showing up to church, right? We generally want to do good things, and we are rule followers. And so this brother, who's been a rule follower his whole life, sees this giant party going on for the younger brother, and he's like, "Where's mine?" You guys ever feel that way sometimes? You're like, I'm sitting here following the rules. I've been doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and yet other people are getting what they should. Other people are getting what I should be getting. Okay? This also makes me think of the brother's reaction to Makes me think of my elementary PE class. Okay? They don't teach you in school how important it is to have the right color of equipment. Kids want the green hula hoop. And if they don't get the green hula hoop, they will throw a fuss about it. Okay? And so I throw out these hula hoops. Some kids get the green ones, some kids get the blue ones. No one ever wants the yellow one. And so sometimes the yellow one's the only one that's left. And the kid will just sit there and pout at it. And that's what I picture the older brother doing. He's out there pouting. And my reaction is whenever students kind of get that look, I'm like, really? Really? The hula hoop's the same, man. It's going to work the same. It does not matter what color it is. Okay? And so I'm not going to feed that poutiness. And I'm like, hey, either you can sit there and keep giving me that look, it doesn't hurt my feelings, or you can have fun in hula hoop. Let's see what the father's reaction is to this. Let's see if he reacts the same way that I would react. Okay? Verse 31. My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So he does not react the same way that I would react to kids not getting their hula hoop. Right? He embraces him the same way that he embraced the prodigal son. He goes out to him and is like pleading with him. And he encourages him. He says, yes, you have been doing what you're supposed to be doing. I'm so grateful for that. I've already given your brother what he's going to get. Everything you have, all that work you're doing, that's yours. Your inheritance is still there. Keep doing the work. And he pleads with him to come back into the party. And that's where the story ends. We don't know if the brother decides to go back in there. But now think about your audience again. Think about if you're the tax collector and the Pharisee. Okay? The Pharisees here are the older brother. They see these good things happening for other people. They are the rule followers. But they're the rule followers because they want to earn their way. And Jesus says, guess what? The work I'm going to do on the cross is way more powerful than anything you're going to do. You cannot do such good works that you're going to earn your way. And if you are the sinners and the tax collectors, and you hear about the dirty, nasty things that they've been doing, and how does the Father embrace them? He makes them their own. Okay? He doesn't sit there and wag his finger at them and say, I told you so. I knew you were going to do that. I knew you were going to mess up. I told you so. And that's not what God's going to do to us when we mess up. And we are going to mess up. He puts a ring on our finger that says, hey, you are my son. You are my daughter. You are mine. Right? So when I was preparing this lesson, I went a couple different routes. In my mind, I'm like, at some point in my life, I've been the prodigal son. So I was like, I'm going to do a sermon on that. I'm going to do a sermon where I messed up. And then I was like, and then I kind of went through a phase where I was like the older brother, right? And I'm like, man, I made some really good decisions, and I'm not getting what I want right now. What's up, God? Do you not see me? And so I was like, I'm going to do a sermon on the older brother. I'm going to come from that perspective. Because I'm a rule follower, and I'm not getting what I want, and I don't understand why. But the more that I read this scripture, the more that I realize it's not about me. It's not about you. It's not about the younger brother, and it's not about the older brother. Ultimately, it's about the Father. And if you read the first two parables, it's all about him seeking the lost. And that when we rebel, and when we mess up, and when we go away, he's going to be there. And you can turn to him and run to him, and he will meet you there, wherever you're at, no matter how messy you are. So no matter how big your mess up is, or how good of a deed you are, it's not going to be more powerful than the cross. At the end of YF, I always ask, so what? So what? Who cares? What's my walk-away point? Why do I care about this parable, Coleman? Okay? And here's what I tell you. Is if you are the prodigal son, and I don't know everybody's heart, and I don't know everyone's experience or background, is that there's nothing you can do that's going to make you too dirty or gross for Jesus. Okay? All you have to do is turn to him and run to him, just like the prodigal son, and turn away. And Jesus is going to love you and embrace you like you're his own. And if you are the older brother, and maybe you've been doing everything right that you possibly can, and things are not breaking your way, Jesus is there. Your inheritance is sealed. Okay? You got heaven waiting for you.
will happen. Okay? Let's pray. God, thank you so much for just sending your Son to die on that cross, that we can have an opportunity to come to you. And we thank you for the work that he did, that no matter how good we are or how bad we are, that you're there for us and that you loved us. And so thankful that you're looking out for us and that you're going to meet us right where we're at. Pray that we just have good, awesome weeks, that we kind of live this out. Think about what that means for us, God. And that we can love other people, God, and that we would be lights and salt, God, to other people. And that we just have this joy about us. Because of this truth, that there should be a joy of we know the inheritance that we have, and we have the best Father, God. Pray that we just live out that truth, and really think about it and reflect on it, God, and pray that we just have good, awesome weeks. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Replacement is here. Wasn't that awesome? Wasn't he great? This is so cool. It's amazing to see the talent that's on this island. You guys are